There comes a moment, sudden, silent, and brutal, when the narcissist realizes they've lost someone they cannot replace. Not someone dependent. Not someone submissive. But someone powerful. The narcissist's illusion of control is not just a behavioral pattern, it is the very scaffolding of their psychological structure. At the core of the narcissist's worldview is the belief that people exist to orbit around them, to supply affirmation, obedience, and emotional energy. This isn't rooted in strength, but in fragility, specifically in the inability to internally generate self-worth. To maintain a sense of importance, the narcissist must control the narrative, control the perception of others, and most importantly, control the people closest to them. That illusion, once threatened, unravels with a violence that is both desperate and revealing. Control for the narcissist is subtle. It doesn't always come in the form of overt domination or aggression. It often manifests as manipulation disguised as care, guilt cloaked as love, and exploitation sold as mutual benefit. They condition you to second-guess yourself, to doubt your instincts, and to eventually rely on their version of truth over your own. Over time, your identity is eroded not through one grand event, but through 1,000 little compromises. They take your empathy and twist it into a weapon against you. They make your boundaries feel like betrayals. Your silence becomes submission in their eyes, and your compassion becomes a license for further control. But none of this is sustainable. Because if the narcissist builds their kingdom on the illusion of control, then the loss of someone powerful is an earthquake. When a strong individual finally sees through the manipulation and chooses to walk away, the narcissist doesn't just lose a person, they lose the mirror they depended on to maintain the illusion of their own superiority. They're forced to confront the idea that the power they thought they held was never truly theirs. It was lent to them, often unknowingly, by someone who believed in the possibility of growth, change, or healing. And when that belief is withdrawn, when the powerful person withdraws, the narcissist is left with themselves. And that, above all, is what they fear. What makes the illusion so insidious is that for a time, it works. It creates a false sense of stability for the narcissist and a dangerous form of dependency for the other party. But it is always temporary, because the truly powerful, those with inner integrity and self-awareness, eventually awaken. And when they do, they don't retaliate, they don't negotiate, they exit. That exit is the shattering of the illusion. It is not loud, it is not vindictive, it is decisive, and it is final. In that moment, the narcissist realizes too late that the control they thought they had was an illusion they clung to like a lifeline. And now the rope is gone. The shock of self-awareness, for a narcissist, is not a gentle revelation. It is a psychological collision, a head-on crash with a truth they've spent years avoiding. Narcissists are, by design, avoidant of introspection. Their entire identity is crafted to protect them from confronting internal emptiness, insecurity, or inadequacy. To maintain this fragile self-image, they surround themselves with people who validate the narrative they've built, that they are special, superior, untouchable. But when someone powerful walks away, especially someone who once gave them genuine care, insight, or value, that carefully curated illusion begins to collapse, and self-awareness hits them, not as a slow realization, but as an emotional ambush. The narcissist is not prepared for this moment. They expect compliance, not defiance. They expect to be chased, not ignored. So when the person they thought they had a hold over detaches, without chaos, without needing to be understood, without begging to be seen, the narcissist is confronted with a terrifying idea. It wasn't them. It was me. That thought, no matter how fleeting, shakes their internal world. For a narcissist, the realization that someone left not because they were too sensitive, too emotional, or too needy, but because they were strong enough to leave toxicity, challenges the entire framework of their identity. This moment of awareness isn't transformative in the way it might be for a healthy person. It doesn't lead immediately to remorse, growth, or redemption. Instead, it is often met with rage, denial, or a desperate attempt to reassert control. But no matter how loudly they protest, or how quickly they attempt to replace what was lost, something deep inside has shifted. They begin to feel the vacuum left behind, not just by the absence of a person, but by the absence of the illusion that they were the one in control. The person they lost was not just another admirer. That person reflected back a deeper truth, a mirror the narcissist smashed, only to miss once it was gone. And what hurts them the most is the realization that they underestimated you. They thought your silence was submission, your forgiveness was weakness, and your empathy was naivety. They didn't account for your strength, your ability to recover, or your capacity to walk away without needing closure. That kind of departure cuts deep because it forces the narcissist to consider a version of the story where they're not the hero, or even the victim, but the antagonist. And that is a role they have never rehearsed. The shock of self-awareness comes too late because by the time it arrives, the relationship is already dead. Not damaged, dead. The bridge is burned, not by anger, but by indifference. And the narcissist, for all their need to be perceived as powerful, is left chasing ghosts, haunted not just by what they lost, but by the person they could never control, and by the version of themselves they refused to confront. The narcissist's existence is built upon the foundation of a false self, a carefully crafted persona designed to mask deep-seated insecurity and emotional fragility. This false self is grandiose, entitled, charming, and often convincing. It is not who they truly are, but who they need to be seen as in order to survive emotionally. The narcissist doesn't engage with the world from a place of authenticity, but from a place of performance. Every relationship, every conversation, every gesture is filtered through this mask, designed to elicit admiration, obedience, or control. But when someone powerful walks away, especially someone who once validated that false self, the mask begins to slip. And what lies underneath is not strength or confidence, but fear, shame, and an unbearable emptiness. The collapse of the false self is not instantaneous. It begins with small fractures, moments where the usual tactics no longer work. The person who once responded to guilt now sets boundaries. The one who once chased them during silent treatment now goes silent themselves. The validation they once depended on is gone, and they find themselves unable to refill the tank with new supply. The reality begins to dawn that their charm, manipulation, or victimhood no longer have the same effect. These cracks deepen with time, until the mask is no longer sustainable. When this collapse begins, the narcissist may spiral into confusion, rage, or self-pity. They might lash out, blaming others for their pain, trying desperately to reassemble the persona that once gave them power. But the emotional infrastructure holding it up, constant external validation, is no longer available. What they are left with is their true self, the one they've spent years denying, and it is often underdeveloped, wounded, and incapable of healthy self-regulation. That inner self does not know how to cope with rejection or loss, because it was never given space to grow. It was buried beneath the performance. This collapse is deeply unsettling for the narcissist because it strips them of their primary defense mechanism. Without the false self, they are exposed. They can no longer pretend to be the victim when accountability is demanded. They can no longer pose as the perfect partner when someone walks away. They can no longer control the narrative when others start seeing the truth. They are left with nothing to stand on but the painful realization that the persona they projected was not sustainable, and worse, not believed anymore. The most disturbing part of this experience for the narcissist is that they still crave the power, the validation, the admiration, but now they see that the tools they once used to obtain those things have lost their effectiveness. The person they lost was not just a source of supply, they were an anchor for the illusion. Their presence made the narcissist believe the false self was working. Their departure, therefore, is more than abandonment, it's exposure. The collapse of the false self is not just the end of a relationship, it's the end of the lie. And for someone who has never built an identity rooted in truth, that collapse feels like psychological death. A boundary is not simply a personal rule or a defensive wall, it is a declaration of identity. It says, this is who I am, this is what I accept, and this is where I end, and you begin. For the narcissist, boundaries are seen as threats because they expose the limits of their control. The narcissist thrives in relationships where lines are blurred, where guilt can replace dialogue and obligation can override autonomy. But when a powerful individual sets a boundary, it disrupts that entire system. It forces the narcissist to confront a truth they refuse to accept, that they are not entitled to other people's emotional resources. The power of a boundary lies in its clarity. It is a silent truth teller. It doesn't shout or justify itself. It doesn't plead for understanding. It simply exists. And for the narcissist, who depends on chaos and emotional confusion to maintain dominance, clarity is deeply destabilizing. They rely on ambiguity to manipulate vague accusations, shifting standards, conditional affection. Boundaries cut through all of that. When someone finally says, no more, it's not just about stopping a behavior, it's about revealing the pattern and refusing to continue participating in it. To the narcissist, a boundary feels like betrayal because they mistake closeness for compliance. They do not see love as a mutual exchange, but as a system of control. When they say I love you, what they often mean is you belong to me. So when the object of their control pushes back, not with rage, but with resolve, it introduces a form of truth they can't manipulate. It says, I see what this is, and I no longer accept it. That truth is painful because it removes the narcissist's ability to rewrite the narrative. They can no longer claim innocence, superiority, or victimhood without resistance. The game ends. But the person who sets the boundary undergoes their own transformation. They shift from being reactive to being sovereign. No longer defined by how the narcissist treats them, they begin to define themselves. That moment when someone finally draws the line and means it is not just self-protection, it is self-affirmation. It's the reclaiming of personal truth, often after months or years of psychological erosion. And it's one of the most powerful forms of healing there is. What makes boundaries so threatening to narcissists is not that they cause rejection, but that they reveal reality. They unmask the imbalance. They expose the emotional exploitation. They shine a light on the false dynamic and demand something the narcissist cannot give: mutuality, respect, and authenticity. A narcissist can only exist in relationships where those things are absent or unspoken. A boundary speaks them loudly, and once it's spoken, there's no going back. Even if the narcissist tries to punish, guilt-trip, or seduce their way back in, the dynamic has shifted. The person who sets the boundary has awakened, and that awakening becomes a truth the narcissist can't unhear. The most profound victories in life often happen in silence, not in dramatic confrontations, not in bitter revenge, but in the quiet, deliberate act of choosing oneself. When someone walks away from a narcissist, not in anger but in clarity, they claim a kind of power that cannot be taken back. That is the essence of self-actualization. It is not about proving anything to the narcissist, or even about being seen and understood. It is about no longer needing to be. That is the victory. The narcissist may never admit it, never acknowledge it, but they feel it. And more importantly, you feel it. Because for the first time, your worth is no longer up for debate. Narcissists feed on chaos, on emotional dependency, on the need for validation. They are energized by reactions, whether it's praise, anger, confusion, or pain. What they cannot handle is indifference. When a person they once controlled begins to move in silence, no longer explaining, justifying, or defending, it delivers a blow far greater than any insult ever could. Silence is not passive, it is powerful. It is the space where healing happens, and identities are rebuilt, not as reactions to abuse, but as expressions of authentic selfhood. Self-actualization is the final stage of reclaiming your life. It is what happens when you stop trying to get the narcissist to understand what they did. You realize that their lack of empathy is not a puzzle to solve, it's a reality to accept. You stop chasing closure from someone who is incapable of giving it. Instead, you create closure through your own growth, your own peace, your own forward motion. You begin to make choices that reflect your values, not your wounds, and in doing so, you stop being a character in their story and become the author of your own. The narcissist, for all their manipulative brilliance, does not expect you to thrive without them. They assume your strength was borrowed, your confidence was conditional, and your identity was tied to them. So when you rise, not loudly, not spitefully, but quietly and unmistakably, they are forced to confront a truth they were never prepared to face. You were never under their control. You were simply too kind, too hopeful, too patient, but not weak. Never weak. This silent victory isn't for show. It doesn't need witnesses. It doesn't need applause. It lives in small moments, when you no longer flinch at their name, when you no longer second-guess your boundaries, when you wake up without the weight of their expectations on your shoulders. It is the internal knowing that you are enough, whole, and free. In this stillness, you find your real power, not in conquering them, but in no longer needing to. That is what the narcissist never saw coming, and that is the victory they can never take from you. When a narcissist realizes they've lost someone powerful, it is not just the loss of a person, it is the unraveling of the illusion they built around them. The control they thought they had, the admiration they believed was permanent, and the identity they crafted through manipulation, all begin to collapse. But the true story here is not their reckoning, it is your rising. Because every moment you saw through the illusion, every boundary you set, and every step you took toward reclaiming your voice, was a return to yourself. And in that return, you did not just survive the narcissist, you transcended them. You no longer exist in the shadow of who they needed you to be. You now stand in the light of who you truly are, powerful, whole, and free. And that truth, once claimed, can never be taken away.